AP Royal Oak, Rolex Pepsi, Hulk, Daytona. Everyone knows that these watches will increase in value, sometimes even doubling or tripling their retail price. But getting a hold of these watches for a retail price is impossible for 99% of us. So you might be wondering if there are other watches that will hold or even increase in value. Well, there are definitely some out there, but they are harder to spot, and that's why I'm going to give you 5 essential characteristics of a watch that will retain its value or even rise. But before I start, I have to mention that I know that one should only buy a watch because you want the watch, and the thought of selling it shouldn't even cross our minds, especially before we even purchase the watch. However, spending thousands of dollars on something that is not essential is not that easy for a lot of us, because not every one of us has so much disposable income, and that's why we have to carefully consider every watch purchase, because if we are in dire need of money, reimbursing things that are not essential is the first thing that comes to our mind. We have to accept the fact that watch collecting has changed in recent years from collecting watches because we like the watch to buying watches as an investment, just like stocks or property. The main upside with watches is that we can actually enjoy our investment by wearing it. I don't think that you can wear your stocks or gold bars, and that's one of the main reasons why the watch collecting hobby has boomed in recent years. With this disclaimer out of the way, we start with the first thing that you have to keep in mind, which is the brand of the watch. It sounds ridiculous, but when it comes to the potential growth of a watch, the name on the dial is the most important thing, because oftentimes the brand alone is enough for people to go bananas over a specific watch. If we just look at the offerings from the big three, Rolex, Audemars Piguet, and Patek Philippe, we'll notice that almost all of their watches, except really expensive ladies' pieces, will retain or increase in value. Buying a watch from these brands is almost always a safe purchase because the brand alone ensures the value of the watch. Watches from a micro brand, on the other hand, don't retain their value that well because they tend to be too niche for the mass market, and finding the right person that wants to purchase your watch is quite difficult. Even if the micro brand offers a better watch, people tend to stick with familiar names, and that's why you should probably stay away from these brands if value retention is important to you. Even if the micro brand is currently hyped, for example watches from the company Ming, it's difficult to sell these watches because the majority of the great dealers tend to avoid these watches, and selling them privately is the only option. However, other brands like Omega, Tudor, or Grand Seiko also have watches that have retained or even risen in value. But when it comes to these brands, we have to look at the next point that determines the value, which is the availability or the lack of it. What I mean with availability or the lack of it is the good old limited edition, limited region shenanigans. Grand Seiko, for example, is the main culprit of this sales technique. They make a watch in a limited quantity, for example 1,000 pieces, and this limited edition trick creates the fear of missing out, forcing us to buy the watch as soon as possible. This drives the price of the watch up on its own, because oftentimes a lot of people didn't get one of these limited editions and are forced to purchase the watch on the second-hand market, and after a while the price of that watch will rise, especially if it's a limited edition celebrating a specific event. If you purchase a limited edition of a popular brand like Omega, Grand Seiko, Vacheron, you'll be sure that it will at least retain its value. Another strategy brands do to ensure the desirability of their watches is by locking the region of purchase. Some watches can only be purchased in a specific country, like the Omega Speedmaster Tokyo Olympics edition. These have risen a lot in value because of their limited availability in Japan. And since not every watch collector can travel to Japan, especially right now, the price of these watches have risen by a lot. A great example of a limited availability and region locking is the green Rolex Datejust Chronograph. This watch is limited to 300 pieces and it was only sold in Japan. And this Rolex is just a prime example of a watch that will rise in value, with it being a Rolex, a limited edition, and it only being available in a limited area. So it's no wonder that this watch is currently selling double its retail price. Another important thing that you have to keep in mind is the model of the watch. If the model is popular, like a Speedmaster, Submariner, Black Bay, El Primero, all these kind of watches, you'll be sure that it will always have a target audience when you want to sell your watch. Oftentimes, buying a watch from popular model lines will ensure that your watch will retain the majority of its value. Another benefit about buying such a watch is that the model line will get a price increase every couple of years. So, for example, the Seamaster on a bracelet retailed in 2020 for 4,800 euros, and now it's selling for 5,100 euros MSRP. So you can expect that your watch will also increase in value if a price increase happens. And if you bought a watch from a popular model line, there's a chance that your model will get discontinued one day and a new model replaces yours. This would be bad in every other branch because no one wants the older stuff. People always go for the new and shiny. For example, the new iPhone that gets released every year, or an updated version of your car. But in watch collecting, this isn't that relevant. Even if the movement or the case gets an upgrade, it doesn't make your watch obsolete. I mean, it's not like your watch will start talking. Hey Rolex, what's the weather for today?
It's currently cloudy and 4 degrees.
And that's why a discontinuation of a watch doesn't spell disaster for you. It's actually the opposite, because yours is now unavailable and not everyone will enjoy the changes in the new model, and that's why some people will seek out the old model instead of the new one. Take the previous Omega Speedmaster Professional for example. It was discontinued at the beginning of this year and the second-hand value of it has risen by around 1,000 euro during 2021. That's insane if we consider that 2 years ago you could have bought it at a dealer with a 2-digit discount and now it's trading far above retail. But if we are at the topic of discontinuation, there's a high possibility of an increase in value if you own a watch that gets discontinued. Take the Rolex Hulk for example. It was trading for around 15,000 euros before it got discontinued, and it jumped up to 20,000 euros in a day after the announcement of it. That's crazy, especially since nothing actually changed about the watch itself. It's just the fact that you won't be able to get it from Rolex themselves. I don't think that you could have gotten it even before it got discontinued, but that's not important right now. Because this price spike is something that happens with a lot of watches, not only with Rolex watches. It's just a lot more visible on watches that are already popular, like the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Jumbo or the Patek Philippe Nautilus. These watches will get discontinued at the end of 2021, and they will most likely be replaced by a successor, but the price of the current model have already gone uphill. For more details about this phenomenon, I have a video explaining it with the Rolex Submariner as an example, but the reason why you clicked on this video is to spot these watches, because in hindsight everything seems so plausible. The easiest way of spotting watches near discontinuation is looking at the specs of it. Take Rolex for example. They have started to introduce the new 32 movements in 2015, replacing their older 31 movements. It started with the Day-Date, followed by every other watch line. Last year they upgraded the Submariners and the Oyster Perpetual, and this year the Explorers with the 32 movements. The only two watch lines left that feature the older 31 movements are the Air King and the Milgauss. These watches are sure to go uphill, and prices have already started to creep upwards recently. Going for watches near discontinuation is something that not everyone wants, because new watch releases have upgrades and better specs. But buying new watches doesn't mean that you will lose a lot of money, because the last and possibly the most important thing that you have to keep in mind about value retention and future growth is the time and price when you purchase and sell your watch. Oftentimes, purchasing your desired watch at the right price is enough to keep the value of it. For example, paying nearly full retail for an unlimited Tag Heuer or Breitling is oftentimes one of the worst things that you can do, because you can find almost every model from them a lot cheaper online from trusted sources. For example, this Breitling Navi timer, reference AB0127211B1P1. Who the fuck came up with this reference number? Costs 7,850 MSRP. But you can find the exact same model on Chrono24 with a 30% discount. Unless you're building a relationship with a dealer, it doesn't really make sense paying the MSRP, because in the end it's the same watch. Nowadays, a lot of watches can be found cheaper online, and if you purchase your desired watch at the lowest price on the market, you'll be sure that your watch will retain its value for the most part. I know that some of you don't want to shop online for a luxury watch, because no one wants their precious item to be mishandled by the delivery guy. Going into an authorized dealer and asking for a discount is still something that you can do. You shouldn't expect them to match the online price, but you'll be sure that they will find a middle ground with you. And it also builds the relationship with the dealer. Maybe one day you'll be the 1% that gets the Submariner for retail because you purchased the Lavi timer at that dealer. So either way you choose, you have to pay below retail if you want your watch to retain its value if it's not a popular model. Another thing that you have to keep in mind is when you sell your watch, because you only lose money if you sell it for less. I recommend hoarding your watch as long as possible because the value of watches will always increase faster than the rate of inflation. Unless you're in some kind of a financial disaster, I don't recommend selling your watch if you get less than what you paid for it. And that's really the essence of value retention, because as long as you keep your watch, you won't be losing money. I know the feeling of watching the price of my watch falling on the second-hand market, and I also start to worry. Was this purchase a wrong decision? Should I sell it now before it drops even further? Will the price rise if I keep it for a little longer? These questions will always pop up if you're investing in something. Take the stock market for example. You might know that the stock market is unstable. Sometimes the value of a stock will drop by 50% overnight, and it takes years until it's fully recovered. And that's the same with watches. Panicking as soon as the price of your watch drops below the purchasing price is something that will not only cost you a lot of money, but most importantly, the enjoyment of your watch. That's why I started to not care about the value of my watch and just enjoy wearing it. And since I always follow one of these criteria before every watch purchase, I know that even if the price of my watch might drop, as long as I keep it for a longer period of time, I'll definitively make my money back, and oftentimes I'll get a lot more than what I paid for. And now that you know my 5 tips on spotting watches that will definitively increase in value, as long as you follow some of them when you purchase your watch, I'm sure that it will at least retain its value, but most likely it will also rise in its value. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye!